Hey everybody, it's a new video from another majestic INFJ. Thanks for joining. This is another live stream that I'm going to post later. Again, just to sort of motivate myself to do these more often. So today I'm going to talk about why INFJs are so boring, um, and and get into how that can raise the issue of, I think people sort of misunderstanding what FE is or does or how it sort of manifests itself. Um, but anybody who's been following typology and reading the forums and watching all the YouTube channels and everything, you'll quickly realize that INFJs are very overrepresented in the personality um, uh, the community, I guess, right? Um, so especially since they're supposed to be the rarest type. I don't know if that's true. I've never really seen the data, but you just hear it all the time. And but there tend to be a lot of them out there in the personality community, and I think a lot of it is just because this is personality, cognitive functions, that's just like candy to a baby for an INFJ, because INFJs in particular, they are using FE as their tool function, right? And I had a whole video on that yesterday of what the tool function does. But in essence, the tool function is basically, for lack of a better term, the tool you pick out of your, cognitive function stack when you have to do things, when you have to, do some sort of goal-oriented behavior, especially when faced with sort of a new situation. And INFJs, because that's in our second slot, that's immediately what we go running to when we need to do some sort of operation. Now, it might not be the best tool to use, but it's at least where we start. It's kind of where our attention will first focus. Our dominant function is always just sort of, humming along, running along in the background. But when we've got to sort of zero in and work on something and we need to pull out a tool, first thing, the first tool we always grab is, extroverted feeling, right? An extroverted feeling is, again, sort of essentially figuring out or working on goal-oriented behavior in the social domain, right? So working with people in a very non-linear, dynamic sort of fashion, right? Because people are unpredictable. And so you have this whole part of your brain that is, through evolution, just sort of fine-tuned to sort of working with people and working with social dynamics and all of that. And that's essentially what FE is doing. And trying to navigate through the social domain and get you from point A to point B in very goal-oriented behavior. And because that's sort of the tool that INFJs like to use, they're naturally drawn to things that explain how personality work, explain how social dynamics work, explain how people work, how the mind works. And it gives us sort of this map that we can work with, right? Is it an accurate map? By no means. It's not accurate. There's a lot of fuzziness, a lot of subjective interpretation that goes into it, and we all know it. There's nothing, it's not like physics or anything where there's a nice mechanical system, but it's close enough, right? And it gives us a framework. It gives us some sort of patchwork. It allows us to sort of organize our thoughts and organize the conversation in a way where we can sort of map out social dynamics, right? Because that's just what FE is always doing, right? Okay. So you have this proliferation of INFJs in the community. And then you have a lot of INFJs that, let's just all admit it, INFJs can come across as kind of boring, which is weird and unexpected since they're supposed to be using FE all the time. But hear me out, and we'll sort of address that. But because of that, I think because people sort of have this sort of misunderstanding of what FE is doing, they'll see somebody online and just who claims to be an INFJ and has an INFJ channel and everything. They'll be like, oh no, there's no way you're an INFJ. You're too sort of monotonous, plodding, boring, whatever you want to say, and I'm not seeing any FE here. And if you're an INFJ, you'd be a little bit more bubbly, gregarious, emotive, however you want to describe it. So a couple of things. Number one, I think that's just sort of misunderstanding what FE is really doing. But we'll get to that in a second. Number two, I think the reason that all of us INFJs, and I'm gonna put myself in this bucket too. Trust me, I get it. We come across as not very like emotive or bubbly or anything like that, because when we're doing these kinds of videos, whether it's by ourselves or we're interacting with other people, we're sort of in ponderous mode, right? We're using that introverted thinking third slot, introverted intuition first slot, and it's just a loop, right? It's just an internal loop. And that's how we come up with our little theories and explanations of the world. And your introverted intuition will have sort of a idea pop up, and your introverted thinking will sort of check it for validity against different sorts of interpretations or different examples or counter examples, and it's all going on internally, and nobody likes to watch anybody just sort of go through their sort of internal loop. And the FE, in a way, sort of gets shut off, right? Because they're not engaging in FE. They're not faced with an FE problem a lot of times. When they're doing something like this and just sort of riffing, or if they come up with like a very structured video, where they're sort of, here's what an INTJ is, and here's what an INFJ is, and all that, it comes across as, again, a little monotonous, not very bubbly, because they're not really engaging in sort of FE type social interaction behavior. They just want you to know what they've figured out about the personality type and how different people map onto it. And same when they're, sort of doing interviews or, discussing it with other people online. Some INFJs tend to be a little bit more bubbly than others. But, and I hate to say it, but especially guys who are INFJs tend to be a little sort of just, sort of monotonous. They take a long time to answer a question, and that's just their wheels turning. Like, you can just see it, going on. And so I think people misread that, and they think, oh, well, this must be a personality, they must be wrong about their personality, right? There's no way they're an INFJ. They must have some sort of personality that has introverted feeling, because they're not showing me anything. They're not expressing emotions. And I'd say that's wrong on a lot of levels. And I'm going to sort of take through it here. Number one, oh, geez, let's see how, how to go through the order here. Number one, I think that's a misinterpretation of what FE is. And I know, a lot of the websites and a lot of, the experts out there sort of talk about for extroverted feeling as the expression of emotion. your emotion going to the outward direction, or sort of just being expressive so that you sort of wrap everybody into your little INFJ web or something. Um, and I'd say, okay, expressing emotion is could be part of it. It could be, it's sort of a subcomponent, let's just say, of FE, but it's not all of it. And I think if you've sort of fallen into this trap of thinking that anybody who doesn't express emotion sort of on the regular doesn't have FE, um, I would I would suggest, think of FE sort of as a sort of a broader function. There's a broader task that it's trying to achieve. And really what it's doing is it's like I said, it's navigating the social world, trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. Here is the current status. Here's where I want to be. Now, how do I navigate through all these social dynamics to get from point A to point B? Now, a lot of the time, and so that means, let me back up real quick. So that means working with people, getting people to do what you want them to do or to not do what you don't want them to do, right? And that can take form in a lot of different ways, right? There's a lot of different ways to interact with people. You could just be completely avoidant of people and just say, I'm not going to deal with people. And that's how I solve all of my problems, is just by running away from them, right? That could be an INFJ thing, right? But there's also, there's other ways of dealing with people. And yes, one of them is by being very emotional. Well, not very emotional. That's kind of the wrong way to put it, but being very expressive. Laughing at their jokes, nodding along, obviously, mirroring their behavior, trying to get on their wavelength, showing some sort of emotion, to sort of build rapport, or, showing anger or something if somebody's sort of stepping out of line and you want to snap them back in. Yes, okay. That could be a component of FE, but I'll maybe get into this a little bit later. I'll argue that INFJs in particular keep that kind of stuff in check. We don't get overly emotional because we know it doesn't really work. We're too good, like, to be honest, with interacting with people, and we know that barking at people or crying to get what we want really doesn't work in the long term. And maybe when we were younger, that we tried it out and we realized, okay, this isn't really working, and so we've developed much more sort of subtle approaches, let's just put it that way. So INFJs tend to be pretty chill. They don't tend to express a whole lot of emotions, and unless they just absolutely have to. But they're not gonna but they just sort of play it even keel, like it's not going to be too much emotion or too little emotion, right? They just sort of play it even keel. So that's one thing, that INFJ is just sort of along the way. um Once they sort of hit their 30s, 40s, whatever, they tend to chill out a lot, because they realize, like, just that's how that's the easiest way to negotiate or to navigate social dynamics. So you don't see a whole lot of expressiveness, especially in the INFJ. Yes, you'll see it like in ESFJs, um, where that's their dominant function. But I think they're just sort of doing it in a different way. They're not using their dominant function as a tool. It's just that's just who they are. Like, just extroverted feeling is just always sort of just it's their baseline. It's always running in the background. And so they've got no problem just sort of, expressing themselves. But, um, and, maybe the same with the ENFJ. ENFJ tends to be a little cooler too. But, both ESFJs and ENFJs, even though they might be a little bit more emotive and expressive, they don't know, they know what they're doing most of the time. They don't overdo it. They might, depending on your personality type, and you might think they're overdoing it, but by and large, they kind of keep it in check. But it's a little bit more emotive than what you're going to see with an ISFJ or an INFJ. ISFJs also, because they've got FE is their tool function, their second function. They tend to be a little on, just sort of the cool, calm, and collected side. And they do come across as like a little boring a lot of times until you get to know them. Same with INFJs. Like INFJs are hilarious once you get to know them a lot of times. And same with ISFJs. They sort of have this quirky kind of sense of humor a lot of times. But in new situations, they're just playing it cool, right? Because a lot of it is just observing. The INFJ and the ISFJ, their primary function is to suck in observations, to suck in, their environment and what's going on, either for their NI or their SI. And so they're just sort of playing it cool, observing. And then when they see their chance, they'll sort of get in there, right? Or if they don't see their chance, or if they're just completely disinterested, they'll just sit there and, and be boring, I guess. And it's not until something happens where they've got some sort of goal or task or something that they've got to do that they, pull that FE tool out of the box and turn it on. Okay. So when you're watching these INFJ videos, including my own, I'll put myself in this group, keep that in mind that FE is not really about just showing emotion, being emotive, being bubbly and gregarious or anything like that. And just because somebody is not bubbly and gregarious or whatever, it doesn't mean that they've got subconscious FE or polar FE or FE on the backstack. It's just because there isn't a reason to engage it, maybe quite yet. Especially with the INFJ and the ISFJ, because we're kind of selective about how we engage it. And then, if we're doing sort of pontificating and theory building and all that, we're using that introverted intuition, that introverted thinking, and coming up with, theories, ideas with that introverted intuition, and then checking them for validity with our introverted thinking, and just going through one iteration after another iteration. Here's an idea, here I'm going to check it against validity, doesn't necessarily check out, but we're close, so I'm going to revise my idea, and then I'm going to double check it for validity using my thinking. Okay, we're getting closer, not quite there yet. Just this loop over and over again. And watching somebody in one of those internal loops is not exciting. But you get them out of that loop, and now all of a sudden they have to interact with people and with the outside world. They're like a totally different person a lot of times. The other thing is, I don't I think let me see how to put this. I think there's just sort of a general misinterpretation that FE is emotion. And yes, I know a lot of websites and a lot of experts out there refer to FE, in sort of these emotional terms. But I just think it's a small component, or maybe a big component, of what FE is really doing. And FE is really just sort of navigating social dynamics. And if there's no reason to be showing emotion given the situation, then somebody like an INFJ is really not going to do it. And we keep our emotions in check. We play it cool. um, you know, Especially after sort of your mid 20s or so, when you get all this sort of figured out. Um, and let's contrast that, right? So a lot of times, and again, this has been going on for as long as I've been following this stuff, which is 15, 20, I don't know, a long time, 10, 15 years. And I doubt it's ever going to change, but we'll see. But what a lot of times what you'll see is somebody will make a comment, or see somebody who claims to be an INFJ, and the INFJ doesn't come across as all that exciting or interesting, and they'll be like, well, that's got to be an INTJ instead of an INFJ, because they're clearly doing more thinking than feeling, right? And I would say wrong. Number one, the type of thinking that you see in the INFJ is very different than from the INTJ. It's much more theoretical. It's much more um, sort of, again, sort of mapping out ideas and concepts in a and sort of, I don't want to say more logical way, but more of a philosophical. It's more academic. Let's put it that way. It's more academic. It's more philosophical. INTJs are more practical. Yes, they're coming up with new ideas, but they want to apply their new ideas in the real world. They come across as a lot more practical and less academic. So when you sort of see it enough, you'll sort of see the difference. The other thing is that if you're gonna talk about emotion, I think of emotion more of an FI thing. Like, how are you assigning value to, this person or this thing or this event? Um, and that is a much more emotional reaction. The FE emotion is just sort of trying to get everybody to, play nice together, or, sort of making people feel comfortable. FI emotion is like, oh, like your own personal reaction to something. And if somebody has heavy FI, let me give you an example. If somebody has heavy FI, like an INFP, maybe even an ESFP, where they have real heavy introverted feeling, as soon as somebody walks in the room, they are going, if you're talking to them, they are going to tell you whether or not they like them or not, right? Or as soon as like a song comes on the radio or something, like, immediately, like, whether or not they like it. They just can't help themselves from telling you, oh, that guy is so cool, or oh, I hate that guy. And so that's a much more introverted feeling kind of thing. And with the INTJ, first of all, if anybody thinks that INTJs don't have emotion, you've never seen an INTJ freak out. These are the types of guys who will like punch holes in walls when they freak out about, whatever, girlfriend's cheating on them, or they got, lost a bunch of money at the poker table or something like that. Like, when their firecracker goes off, man, it goes off. And so they've got that third slot introverted feeling, which a lot of people call sort of like the child slot, and so they can act really childish. It's really funny when they get heated up about emotion. And then the other thing is you'll see them, they they make a lot of arguments that are opinion driven, right? They like to share their opinion. I mean, the classic, example or saying about the INTJ is, everybody everywhere is doing it wrong. Like, they just think that everybody is just doing whatever it is wrong. Like, if you're at a bar and there's a DJ, the DJ is just playing the wrong songs, or the bartender is just making the drink the wrong way. Or if you say something like, hey, let's go to this other place. It's 5 blocks down the road. No, it's 6 blocks down the road. Okay. Just that kind of like everybody's wrong all the time kind of thing. And that's real heavy FI, right? That's kind of unchecked, just sort of creeps in there. Just like INFJs can't help using their introverted thinking and sort of like correcting people on their grammar and just sort of bullshit like that. Um, INTJs can't help themselves when they express their opinion, right? And so they like to get into these so-called arguments about, who's the best band, or not even who's the best band, but like who are the best musicians, who are the is it Radiohead, is it Tool, like these really super intricate things. And it's again, it's just opinion, but they like to express their opinion through arguments. It's real interesting to see. um and so in a lot of ways, INTJs actually come across as more emotive, more emotional than the INFJs do, right? And so if you're just thinking about like thinking versus feeling, like thinking is like, logical adding, math problems, that kind of thing, computer code type stuff, and feeling is emotion, then you're going to fall into the trap of sort of seeing somebody with introverted feeling who likes to express it as an FI user, right? But no, I mean, or I'm sorry, as an FE user, right? Because they're expressing their emotion. So people will, sort of misinterpret INTJs as, I don't know, something with you extroverted feeling. But I would argue, don't fall into the trap of thinking just because somebody expresses their emotions that they are a quote unquote FE user, have FE in the front stack, the top 4 functions, and that if somebody doesn't consistently express emotion, that they're using FI. In fact, I think it's kind of the opposite, because FI really is about your emotions. FE is more about um, not so much how you feel, but how you want the world to feel, right? And again, sort of creating that harmony, is one of the function, or one of the roles of FE. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that helps you sort of navigate through the world. But your own personal opinions and how you feel about things, and if somebody pissed you off, or if you hate somebody or love somebody, that's all FI stuff. And it doesn't have to come through the FE channel. The FI will express itself however FI wants to express itself. And it could be punching a hole in a wall if you're an INTJ. Okay. And same with ISTJs. They can get a little emotional too, because again, they get that third slot, introverted feeling, that sort of child. They're all cool, calm, and collected until somebody breaks their heart, and that childish FI comes out, and you don't want to be around for that. Where an INFJ, like, they're gonna keep it cool. They're gonna keep it cool, as much as they can. Yes, everybody, all types have emotional outbursts. We can't help it. All of us have some level of FI in us, but because our FI is sort of in the backstack and we sort of ignore it, we tend to keep it in check, and we're just trying to navigate the social world, and in a lot of ways not let our FI, or our emotional values sort of mess that up, right? Because a lot of times we'll realize, like, oh, I really need to get this done. I really need this person to, do something for me, and they're not. And I'm so frustrated about it. And I'd really like to yell at them, but I realize, through my FE function, that's not going to work. All right. Or at least with this person, it's not going to work. Okay. Well, I don't know. Hopefully this sort of helps clarify things. Happy to hear any reactions. I do realize that, there's probably going to be a lot of people who disagree with this. That's cool. But, I would ask you, if you do disagree with it, just sort of think of FE in the broader picture of not so much expressing emotions, but trying to navigate social dynamics and to achieve your goal. And if expressing emotion helps you do that, then okay, you can sort of unleash some of it. But a lot of INFJs have picked up along the way that, having emotional outbursts or being overly emotive or overly expressive just doesn't get the job done. Where on the flip side, our INTJ and ISTJ buddies over there with, introverted feeling on the third slot, they can be prone to some emotional outbursts that come across as like, whoa, that's a lot of emotion. And they are FE polars. That's the other thing to keep in mind, right? So FE for these guys is very much a blind spot. And so they don't necessarily have that negative feedback that FE could give you to say, whoa, let's put this in check because it's not helping. And that's why they just sort of, if you have, and I've got INTJ friends and we all love them. But, it can be, sort of exhausting sometimes, if you're out with them and they're just complaining about everything, right? Because they don't have that FE developed where they can sort of read the room and realize that, okay, you've complained about, everything the last 15 minutes, we get it. Like they're not reading the room, right? They're, and most people are sort of polite enough to sort of chuckle along, and they kind of read that as, reinforcement, and it just makes it 10 times worse. And so because they don't have that FE, a lot of times they just don't keep their emotions in check. And this is just why they're trolls, why they're just such trolls on the internet, on Facebook and social media, because they just don't have that FE to sort of keep things in check. Um, and they'll just, throw their whatever their opinion is about something or somebody out there, thinking that it's somehow a valid argument. Okay, enough bagging on the INTJs. I love you guys, but you know, come up with a nice systematic rule where anytime you go out, don't make more than 5 complaints. 5 complaints, and then that's it. Call it a night. And then I think things will improve your social life. All right. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. All right. Bye.